Thank you, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Very good morning, good day, wherever you are. And thank you very much for joining this very important event, reiterating the importance of social protections and the need for knowledge sharing within that context. I want to, right at the very outset, acknowledge and applaud the leadership of the permanent representative of Pakistan, and his team for organizing this, not just organizing this event, but for the discussions, the discourse, the planning that has led up to this, which has brought us to this stage. I also want to thank the governments of Nigeria, Turkey, and Costa Rica for their proactive partnership. And I want to thank you all once again for being part of this conversation at a very important inflection point in this process, which we hope will culminate in the creation of the Global Social Protection Platform. Now, in terms of setting the context, I'm sure you're all aware that COVID has deeply imprinted the lives of the rich and poor across the globe. But its deepest weight falls on the poor disproportionately, and especially the new poor, who have been pushed further below the poverty line as a result of the economic hardship that the pandemic has ushered in. These individuals carry multiple burdens already. 500 million individuals risk being pushed into multi-dimensional poverty as a result of the pandemic we're experiencing. And we're all aware that while the impact on the world economy has been massive, the downturn has been more pronounced in low-income countries. And it is exactly in these settings that fragilities of food, health, and social protection systems have been deeply exposed, and inequities have been more intensely exacerbated. Livelihoods have been decimated all over the world at an unprecedented scale, especially for those in the informal economy. Now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are all aware that this is a very dire situation for the poor across the world. Now, when the COVID-19 lockdowns came into effect, our country was at the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe, as a result of which our government provided support to 160 million people who were dependent on daily wages in the informal economy. And this was a very profound moment for our country, as millions of tragedies were averted and cash grants were given to support almost 160 million people. Now, whilst we were rolling out this assistance of economic support in addition to the health response to the pandemic, especially on the economic support side, our government used innovative digital technologies that were end-to-end digitally run, they were totally rule-based, and it was total out-of-the-box thinking that we deployed in terms of implementation to disburse about $1.25 billion in an environment of uncertainty and in a context where the situation was changing. And on a daily basis, as the steward of those operations, as someone responsible for rolling out that cash, on a daily basis, I would scratch my head and say, has any other country done this before? I wonder what other countries of the world are doing at this point. Because each and every country at that point, back in March 2020, must have been planning in a similar way that my country was. There must have been similar cabinet meetings on how assistance should be rolled out. There must have been similar challenges on rolling out support when lockdowns were in effect. There must have been similar conversations on the options, on the challenges, on the possibilities. And on a day-to-day basis, as I sat with my teams, we would talk to each other and say, wouldn't it be nice if there was a platform where we could speak to other countries and post questions and get a peek into what their policy response was? And wouldn't it be nice if we had a peer group where we could share our challenges on a day-to-day basis? But as you all know, there is no formal mechanism of experience sharing between ministries of poverty alleviation and social assistance. There are actually no such avenues. And dare I say, in the multilateral system, social protection is almost an orphan area in terms of government-to-government exchanges. So this is something I discussed with our permanent representative in New York and his team. And we started once the first wave of the pandemic was behind us, once Pakistan had successfully distributed the cash assistance, the first wave of cash assistance. And by the way, with great humility, I would like to say that ours was the fastest deployment and the third largest in terms of the percentage of population served according to a World Bank report. And again, with great humility, once we had successfully done that, we sat with the PR and we said, this is something, this is the right time to set up an institutional arrangement for government to government experience sharing with social protection as a reference point, because COVID is a long-term predicament. This is not something which is going to be behind us in a matter of months, and we need an ongoing platform for exchanges, especially in terms of the practical experiences of how things are executed. Now, we all have to appreciate that social protection has a very important place in the COVID context. More than 100 countries had an unprecedented social response, social protection response during the crisis, as our colleague Hugo Gentilini will just demonstrate in his presentation. COVID-19 is in fact threatening to wipe out the development gains of the last century. And in doing so, it is also threatening to reverse 3 decades of gains in poverty eradication. This is a very somber realization. It is extremely sobering to note that the MDG on poverty eradication was achieved 5 years ahead of schedule, but now with the corresponding SDG, we are sadly moving backwards. But against these challenges, I also fundamentally believe that history shows us that tragic consequences have a tendency to catalyze social change. So it may be a bit cliched, but I do believe that this crisis has a silver lining in terms of how we structure the institutions of social protection. And within that rubric, cross-country knowledge sharing is a hugely important space where we need to build our capacity globally. And my compliments and deepest respects to the permanent representative of Pakistan, who has exercised exemplary leadership in this regard. So our intention is to launch a global government-to-government social protection platform. As a starting point, we acknowledge that there are other platforms in place. The World Bank and ILO have what is called USP 2030. The Social Protection Interagency Coordination Board of the World Bank and ILO also exists. There is a movement towards the creation of a global front for social protection. I also want to acknowledge that social protection is getting more traction under the umbrella of the United Nations Food Summit, which is forthcoming on the sidelines of the high-level segment of the General Assembly. The 17 rooms of the SDGs have already been launched, and the first room is dedicated to poverty eradication corresponding to the SDG. There is also the International Poverty Center for Inclusive Growth. And let me tell you, these are very important initiatives, but what we intend creating is a unique government-to-government knowledge-sharing platform. There is no duplication with respect to the initiatives that I just mentioned, and there is a clear comparative advantage. The platform we envisage this as an entirely new initiative, which currently fills an important knowledge gap in the global social protection landscape. And we believe that by unveiling a common social protection space or room for potentially all countries in the world, we could institutionalize the routine of a monthly meeting, which would provide an opportunity for practicing governments to benefit in 4 different ways. Firstly, they could get direct exposure to global knowledge on a regular basis. Secondly, governments would connect and interact with each other during the meeting through a variety of different virtual options, and they would also have the chance to establish direct and bilateral connections. Thirdly, we believe such a platform would foster and strengthen a sense of community amongst country policymakers and practitioners, which is something that is deeply lacking, and I speak from first-hand experience. And finally, we believe that such a government-to-government peer mechanism of peer exchanges, institutionalized on a regular basis, would increase the likelihood of us being on the same page in terms of the key issues and practices, hence promoting policy and delivery coordination. We are all aware that as ministers of social protection, and we have to constantly ask our ministries of finance for budgets. All of us have to go to cabinets making the case that social protection is not just a nice thing to have, that it deeply affects lives and livelihoods, that it's one of the most important contributions to promoting healthcare, to improving education outcomes and nutrition outcomes, and that social protection also has economic multiplier effects. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all rally together and have one voice as social protection ministers, and then coordinate amongst ourselves as to how we would make a stronger case to our respective finance ministers and cabinet colleagues? So, and the initiative is predicated on these 4 assumptions. Now, this is going to be a no-cost initiative. Participation in the initiative would not entail any financial commitments or contributions. Instead, it will rely on voluntary participation and interest in sharing practices and learning from countries' experiences. In terms of the format, from what has been conceptualized so far, we envisage a modular rollout. The knowledge platform would adopt a gradual, progressively implemented rollout. Specifically, it would involve 2 basic phases. The first stage would represent the platform's core backbone, and that would entail a monthly meeting connecting government representatives virtually. And over time, such a meeting could then be complemented by a second phase entailing an array of knowledge management activities like a resource repository or an e-library, and the availability of further products could be distilled and curated based on the inputs of member states and based on what the member states thought was useful for them. So just a quick word about membership and content before I hand it back to the PRR host. In terms of membership, governments would be full members on the platform, and the development partners and selected invitees from academia and the private sector would participate in an observer capacity. And the platform would be targeted both at technical officials as well as cabinet ministers. The content and agenda development will be supported by a light secretariat, and the monthly content would be selected by member states, and it would be captured through an on-demand based mechanism. I think that is crucially important, because rather than logging onto a platform and listening to things that don't resonate with you, it's important to create a space where you can bring your questions, your problems, where you can experience share, and where you can also ask for empirical analysis. So it would be very much driven by the appetite and by the needs of the member states. Of course, we will plan the agenda in advance and accommodate its content based on expressions of interests with regard to themes, issues, and practices. And as I've already said, a light secretariat will support agenda setting. And the other things the secretariat could do is to detect demand and help frame the content and the logistics and planning and whatever else comes with such things. So in a nutshell, we hope to have your membership. We hope that you will sign up to its membership. We hope that you will consider signing a declaration, which we will then use as a tool to raise awareness at a summit level meeting, which we hope to convene in October. Once again, thank you all for being with us on what I think is a very important peg in the process towards the creation of an important institutional arrangement. And once again, the permanent representative of Pakistan and my dear colleague and his team, thank you for all the hard work that you have put behind this. Over back to you.
Thank you very much to Pakistan Minister, and thank you for those kind